journey will guide inside the ride where we fly. Virtual roads touch the sky. Join us here, don't be shy. Inside the ride, yeah, we hide.
Welcome to Inside the Ride by MyWhoosh. I am Cy Bradley, and welcome to episode 14. If you've not gone back and listened to episode 13 yet, you really should, because that was that episode we recorded just a few weeks back with Peter Sagan. So if you've not, go back, take a listen. Today's show, we have another epic guest. We've got none other than head coach here at MyWhoosh, an elite cycling eSports athlete, Zach Nehr. Zach, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, Cy. Thanks for asking. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, no, me too. And then actually I put it out there a couple of weeks ago to the community that we were going to be having you on. So we have got a few questions for the community, Zach. So we'll get to those later in the show. It's worth pointing out, Zach, here to the community that you are going to be a regular on the show because you are head coach here. I think it's only right that we have a regular, not coach's corner, but a sort of 1 week a month, we're going to have you in and we're going to talk all things sports science, cycling, coaching, training plans, workouts, the lot. So if you've got any questions in the future for Zach, drop them on social media, drop myself or Zach a message, hashtag Inside the Ride, and we'll pick up those questions. But Zach, we cannot have you on the show without, first of all, giving a bit of background on you and your cycling background and how you got into the sport. And then of course, how you got into cycling esports. And then at some point, I've just spotted that Stars and Stripes jersey there behind you. Of course, I've got to ask you about that. But let's start at the beginning, Zach. How did you get into bike racing?
Yeah, so it goes all the way back about 12 years ago. I was playing soccer, and that was my favorite sport since I was a kid. And it was just everything soccer all the time. And then when I was 13, I had a series of really bad knee injuries. I actually had a couple of knee surgeries when I was 13, then when I was 14, and I was doing a lot of rehab from that. And it was really, really hard. It was about 6 months of rehab from each injury. And part of the rehab process was actually getting on a spin bike and just spinning. I didn't even have a power meter at the time, just riding super easy.
Spin bike.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Just in the gym. And back then, 20 minutes of rehab on the spin bike, it was so long. It felt horrible. It was so hard. But I came back to soccer after 2 injuries, and then my knee just wasn't feeling right, just wasn't feeling good. And then it just happened that my family and I took a trip to Europe that summer, and we saw the Tour de France in person. And I had kind of watched it growing up. My dad raced for a long time. And as soon as I saw it in person, I was so hooked. Just the crowds, it was thousands and thousands of people, and just the whole energy of the entire race, it just got me. It was like one of those stories where I just saw it for the first time and I was hooked. And I remember getting home from that trip and I told my dad, I want to start riding my bike more. And he got me a bike. He got me a kit. He started training me a little bit because he raced for a long time.
Right? I bet he was that his son was finally on the bike.
Yeah, because as a kid, I did not like riding a bike. Just a ride around the neighborhood for a mile, I just did not enjoy it at all. It's so funny looking back that I just didn't enjoy it at all, and then something just clicked and I loved it.
But if you were a rider, then I'm guessing, if you went to watch the Tour de France and traveled to Europe, I'm guessing your dad was a rider. He was a cyclist, right?
Yes, yeah, he raced for at least 15, maybe 20 years at an elite level around the US, traveling around the US and doing a lot of the big races. And at the time he was a dad with a full-time job, so he was balancing a lot. I don't know how he did that. Knowing what I know now and what it takes to race at this level and compete at this level, it's amazing.
So I'm interested there because I've got kids, right, and I've got 5 of them. So trying to take a different approach with each one, and one of them hopefully will get on the bike at some point. But was your dad sort of trying to get you on the bike when younger, or was he like, hey, you want to get on at some point, son? It's all good. What was sort of his approach?
It was a totally hands-off approach. There was no pushing at all. It was just
Okay.
He was actually helping coach me for soccer and the other sports I was interested in. And then cycling, it was on the TV in the summer. We would watch the races, but I don't remember any kind of push. I do remember going to a couple local criteriums around Wisconsin and doing the kids races at those. And for those, I was just having fun. I wasn't, at that point, looking back, it's so funny. I wasn't competitive at all. I was just there. I don't remember what place I got or anything. I probably wasn't even racing. I was just riding around. But now I'm just so competitive with everything. It's totally different.
I know I've seen it live in action, of course, because you were in Abu Dhabi, and I noticed you've got the towel and the bottle behind you there. So I thought I better wear at least something I got from working at that event as well. So then, obviously, so you got onto the bike, you sort of you got into racing eventually as well. Then I know you were involved with Project Echelon as well at some point, and you raced for that. I mean, that team for one seems to have gone from strength to strength. You know, they were I think the Tour of Britain and the Tour of Norway here this last season gone. So and I want to talk a little bit about Echelon because, of course, the Echelon Racing League is starting soon, which, yes, has an elite category, Zach, but also has something for the community as well, no matter what level you're riding or racing. We'll talk a little bit more of that later on. But how do you get involved with the sort of, Project Echelon then and more professional racing?
Yeah, so Project Echelon is a really funny story because I remember growing up in Southeast Wisconsin. There was this team called Project Echelon that was it was a local team that I raced against all the time, just in local Wisconsin races, and it was just another team kind of that it was like Team Wisconsin, Project Echelon, all these other teams that I was just racing against growing up, and then all of a sudden as I was in college and I was trying to make it as a professional cyclist, I was doing the bigger races and traveling around the country. And all of a sudden, Project Echelon was showing up at these races, and I was on a different team at the time. But by the time we got to maybe 2018, Project Echelon was this national level team that was competing around the country, and they were aspiring to go to the professional level. And I remember coming back to Eric Hill, the manager of Project Echelon, and I was like, "I've known you guys for a long time. Is there any room for me on the team?" And it worked out that I was able to join Project Echelon. It's kind of this hometown team that I kind of went away and did my own thing for a few years, and then all of a sudden, Project Echelon is coming up to this professional level at the same time that I'm trying to make it to that level. And it was just this perfect timing and partnership that I was able to ride with them outside and race with them outside for a few years at the elite level, and to see where they are now is just incredible. It's just every time it's hard to believe. It doesn't even look real when I turn on the TV at the Tour of Norway and Tour of Britain that there's Project Echelon, like my team from
I
Wisconsin.
know. Yeah, I'm obviously based in the UK, right? And I haven't got the historical knowledge of Project Echelon that you have. But even for me, in this last 5 years, when I've seen what they've been doing in cycling esports, and then I was at one of the stages of the Tour of Britain to see that jersey and those riders in real life also was like, hey, cool. I know these guys from racing the Echelon Racing League on, year in, year out as well. So yeah, really, really super cool what that team are doing. And we'll talk a little bit more about Project Echelon and the Echelon Racing League, I think, a little bit later on, because I want to ask you how we're going to get ourselves in shape and fine tune because those races, in fact, they're going to start this weekend on the 7th. So they're going to come thick and fast. But I've got to ask you about that jersey in the background there, because that looks like a national jersey to me. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so that jersey goes back to my time in college. I went to Marion University in Indianapolis, which at the time when I went there as a freshman, it was one of maybe 10 or 15 schools in the US that offered varsity cycling scholarships, which that was kind of my dream going from high school to college. I knew I wanted to go to college and get a degree, and there were very few schools that offered scholarships at that level. So I went to Marion and I raced for them for a few years, and then my sophomore year, or it was my junior year, I think it was my sophomore year, that I had this knee pain come back in the same knee that I had had the two surgeries when I was younger. And it was really, really worrying because it was one of those chronic things where it wouldn't hurt all day. It would be totally fine. And I would get on the bike and 5 minutes in, there was just severe pain. I could hardly pedal. And I did a few months of rehab, going to different doctors and trainers, trying to figure out what the issue was. And by the time I finally went in for an MRI that winter, uh, the results came back and they said I had no cartilage left in that knee. It was just rubbing bone on bone, and I was like, that makes sense where the pain is coming from. That's not good. And so the fix for that was actually a partial reconstruction of my knee because it had so much damage when I was younger playing soccer and all those surgeries before. It was a very serious surgery. It was I think it was right before Christmas that year. It was maybe December 23rd. So that was a rough holiday period, but I actually came back doing rehab that following January and February, and they said it would probably take a few months for me to be able to ride outside again. but I knew collegiate nationals were in April of that year. So that was my goal, was to make it back a couple months before they anticipated me being back. And I was probably riding outside probably March 1st after the surgery, and I was definitely not allowed at that point. But I was confident in my rehab, and I felt good, and I started racing outside, and a month later I went to the collegiate national championships, and I won the varsity
What
time
new?
trial. Yeah, which is where that jersey's from. Yeah, it was incredible. Yeah, like 3 months before that, I was on crutches after my third knee surgery and could hardly walk. And then, yeah, coming to collegiate nationals and winning was just absolutely unreal.
And did you, I'm interested because obviously we're going to talk about your coaching as well, when we get later into the show. But did you have a coach, or were you coaching yourself at that point?
Yeah, my dad was my coach for a long, long time.
Yeah.
He still is. I would probably say I'm more self-coached now.
Yeah.
But for the majority of my career, it was just me and my dad, and I think I learned so much. I say I learned everything from him, everything that I know about cycling. He gave me all the books, and we had so many talks, and the training plans. I remember when I first started racing, the training plan that he would give me was just an Excel spreadsheet with just different workouts in it. Just no files, no power meters or anything like that. Just an Excel spreadsheet with some workouts on it, and it got me to where I am today. So clearly it worked.
Yeah, and to be honest, it sounds one step up than sophisticated than the training advice I was given by a local coach, which was just go out and ride 250 miles a week, Simon. Just get out and ride your miles. Forget about any quality work. Just go and do the miles and go and do the hours. So, it sounds like you already had a step and advantage there. Look, one of the things I want to, I keep saying before we get into coaching, I'm so eager to get onto this coaching aspect, but of course, you were a cycling esports finalist in 2024, live in Abu Dhabi as well. And something really special happened on that stage with you three Americans, if I can say it. But just, before we talk about that specific sort of sprint that you guys did, just tell me a bit about your experience, and in the worlds and that live event being on stage.
Yeah, Worlds this year was amazing. I had been lucky enough to do a few smaller in-person events for esports cycling before, but
Yeah.
but Worlds in Abu Dhabi was so much bigger and better than I had even imagined. And I remember getting off the flight. I flew 15 hours from Chicago to Abu Dhabi, and then I landed, and it was the next day, and it was like a 10-hour time difference. And then as soon as I got off the plane, there's a camera crew ready to give me an interview on the way to the hotel, and I was not expecting that at all. That surprised me. I mean, it woke me up, so that helped.
Yeah, I
But
remember seeing some of the social media footage of like, which our producer now is producing the show did, I think, and organized, but of watching you guys get out of these big white cars outside the hotel. It looked like, like film stars, and you hopefully you were really treated like the athlete royalty that you are.
Yeah, it definitely felt like we were rock stars. Yeah, exactly like you said. I remember taking a bus to the venue, and you show up and you have these press passes, and you walk in, and there's just all the lights and the sound and everything. And it was just so much big. I think everyone's jaw was on the floor when we walked
Yeah.
in. And
Yeah.
it was just, I had seen a couple pictures from social media, but once you're there, the arena's so much bigger and better than you even could imagine.
That's right, because you and the athletes were in it. You weren't too far away, I think, from the venue there. I was in a separate hotel because obviously we kept the athletes and some of the support staff separate. But you were just seeing glimpses on social media as the build was happening, I guess. The other interesting thing that got me as well, thinking about some of those social media posts at the time as well, and even when I met you and some of the athletes there, is sort of those personalities, right? And how those different people reacted. Michael Kaminsky just stood out to me. I remember seeing the footage of him getting out of the car. I've never met Michael before. I've only seen sort of glimpsing pictures of him on social media, but watching the way he got out of that car and the sort of air of confidence that he had about him was epic. And then you've got, Lionel, he's like super fun guy, Dead Bill making faces at camera, and just seeing the way that the different personalities sort of reacted, and some were a bit quiet and shy and ultra focused, I guess. And then you got the more of the showman, as well. And Teppo was another one, right? He's just a showman. He was there for fun. I don't think he was in the best shape of his life, but just seeing those different personalities and watch you guys interact with each other, it just felt fun. And how were you one of those who, I don't know, how did you feel meeting some of these guys? And were you sort of quiet and focused, or did you just want to get in the mix?
Yeah, it's so funny because a lot of these guys and girls, you feel like you've known them for so long
Yeah.
because you've been racing against them, you know their name, you've seen their face, you've probably chatted with them on Discord or Instagram or something like
Yeah.
that, and you feel like you know them because you've been racing against them for 2 or 3 or 4 years, but you've never met any of these people. And a lot of people, they're way shorter or way taller than you thought they were. I remember meeting some people and I was like, "Wow, I'm one of the taller guys here," which because you can't tell from so many
Yeah.
of these Zoom calls and Discord chats and everything. But it's so funny because I feel like my personality, it was kind of in the middle between that quiet and kind of extroverted because I think naturally I'm much more of an introvert and much more quiet, but in an environment like that, surrounded by all these people that you want to talk to these people because I mean these are like the best esports cyclists in the world and it's so interesting and you want to talk about training and nutrition and preparation and everyone's coming from a different country too. So we were all talking about our flights and the time change and jet lag. So there's all that you can
Yeah.
talk about and then as you get closer to the race, I think I was more on the quieter side of getting focused and not being too distracted. There were some people that we were warming up and they were still chatting, and I was like, I need to like focus at this point.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see that, right? Because you're talking about you being a bit more focused then as you get to race time, because uh, you and your colleagues had a plan, clearly, because what you guys did in that, I mean, what happened in that sprint with those guys, the rest of the elites kind of sat up and almost track standing in a way, and then what you three had planned, was phenomenal. Just talk us through who planned that? How did you practice that? And I mean, thinking about it and pointing it off are two different things. So just tell us about how that went.
Yeah, it was over a month before the race, maybe 5 or 6 weeks before the race that Team USA and we got in a chat and
Yep.
we started coming up with some ideas for that stage one for that sprint and we figured out when we could ride the course all together, which was actually kind of a challenge because we were in different time zones across the country
Yeah, and
and
it wasn't available that regular thing, that particular stage, right? Not in a race
that's
scenario
right.
anyway.
That's right. Yeah. So we had to really, yeah, find a time that we could practice it on our own, and we did. We did multiple laps of that stage one, and probably 4 or 5 sprints, like 4 or 5, like all out race level efforts, where
Yeah.
we started our lead out at different points, and we started it maybe at the top of the hill, or in the middle of the downhill, or right before the sprint point. I think we tried a different order but the order was if I let it out, it always was the fastest. I have more of a longer sprint. I don't have a very high peak power. I can barely crack 1100 watts, but I can hold 1,000 for maybe
Yeah.
20 or 25 seconds. So it's kind of the perfect lead out rider. So we practiced that multiple times and we found that if you started your sprint, if I started the lead out in the middle of the downhill, that gave us the most speed coming into the segment and it would always get us the fastest time through the segment. And then I made sure after that practice, I told everyone, don't post this on Strava. I don't want anyone to see our practice because I think
Yeah.
it's a great strategy. And it was one of those things where everyone's coming into the race having done their own preparation and no one's really talked about it because I thought we had a great plan and I didn't know if anyone else had a great plan. I didn't know if someone else had the same exact plan. I was worried
Got
about
it.
that, where someone would jump onto our lead out and we would end up giving them a really fast time. So at the beginning of the race, we actually had a specific countdown to we were going to roll with the start and then stop for 30 seconds. And then after that, we would restart. And that
Wow.
was all planned where we didn't want to lead anyone else out. So we were going to stop together. The rest of the field, we hoped were going to roll away from us. And then as it happened, it was perfect where I started the lead out 30 seconds later and the group in front had gone so slow that we actually started catching them and we got their draft in the second
Yeah.
part of the segment. And it was just so perfect. I'll never forget that moment when Team USA popped up 1, 2, 3. I thought that we would do pretty well doing a lead out like that, but to go first, second, third was I didn't even expect that. It was amazing. I was just smiling for 20 minutes after that.
Well, the amazing thing about that, Zach, is you spoke about yourself there as a lead out in a way, but you did it in a way that nobody sacrificed themselves. You did it in a way that all three of you, clearly, because you got first, second, and third, so you got stage one, got those positions. So it's not like it's not like right, I'm gonna work in for because we know that you've coached Hayden, Hayden Booker as well, right? And but the three of you, Neil, yourself, Hayden, got those top three. So it did it benefit you that the others did what they did? It clearly did, right? With like you say, you caught them up towards that second half, but no one got near it afterwards.
Yeah, it was really perfect for us. It was one of those things where I'm so glad we practiced it because logically I had never thought to start the sprint on the downhill about 100 meters before the segment. I thought if you did the lead out right after that, maybe you could carry more speed, but
Yeah.
it was actually the other way around where if you sprinted on the downhill, because normally you wouldn't want to do that, it wouldn't make as much sense. But with a time segment like that, I also figured out that if I kept sprinting, I could catch the other riders' draft as they came around me. So then we were all, like you said, we just came across the line almost together. So that was perfect.
It's really interesting as well, right? You weren't in. Obviously, we were doing a lot of testing in the back end of the routes and everything, but you were not allowed to do that with us for obvious reasons. And we had a little group going in the testing group that a few other riders were in, and a couple of members of the MyWhoosh team. And I think it was only up until 2 weeks before I just said a comment in the team saying, "Where did this descent come from?" Because I don't remember seeing it like 10 weeks beforehand. And then, I haven't asked Matt yet whether he purposely put that there in that specific position to get. I'm assuming he did because Matt generally is sort of all these things. But yeah, I didn't actually realize until 2 weeks to go that that was there, and you could really benefit with at that increase in speed before you get to that start. So it's phenomenal what you guys did, and yeah, I'm really glad you enjoyed the experience. Zach, we've got to get on to why you're here, right? And it's to talk about racing. It's talk about coaching, live workouts, because you're working with me with the live workouts as well. You're putting together the training plans. I think before we get into the questions that I've had for the community, I just want to talk about a few events that we've got come up because people might have this in mind when we get into how do we train for these events, right? So we've mentioned Echelon. I think we've got to talk about the Echelon Racing League first of all, because obviously that's coming up. Lots of stages to do from January through until, from December through until February. That, of course, is going to lead up to the US National Championships and the Canadian National Championships. But I do want to stress, Zach, that this isn't just for elites, right? And this just isn't for the US and the Canadian communities as well, that anyone can race this. I know I've put my name down to do it, and I know lots of other community members have as well. So I'm just going to run through the categories very quickly. We've got elite, right? And I've taken this from the Echelon Racing League website. You'll find this in the race Bible there. We've got the elite, which is basically anything above 4.2 watts per kilogram FTP. We've got category B, which is anything above 3.3 watts per kilogram. And then, which I think in the US is like category 2 or 3 on your system or something like that. And then we've got category C, which is basically anything below 3.3. So anyone can enter that category. And it is a really great setup. Scratch races. They've gone for some flat rolling routes. So it's going to be really competitive, Zach.
Yeah, the courses, I'm really excited about the courses because a lot of the races that we have on MyWhoosh are really, really hard and they have those longer climbs, whereas the Echelon Racing League has these flatter courses or maybe a
Yep.
course with 1 or 2 short climbs. So and there's a lot of courses that I think are going to end in a sprint, which is going to be really, really interesting. It's not something that you usually see on MyWhoosh.
Yeah, actually, it's going to be completely different than SRC, and I think if you can hang on in there and just some of those sort of shorter, grippier sections, because what I've noticed is as we get later into the series, there's a few more. There's definitely not climbing courses, but there's some more rolling courses. I know we're going to finish off in Belgium as well. So as long as you can hang on through those sort of 90-second punches, that like I say, the sprinters have got a really good chance here as well. And I think it'd be really interesting to see how much sort of broader members of the community also jump on board with those sort of lower categories as well, which would be really cool. I just want to talk about preparation. So the first event is this weekend. It's the Saturday the 7th. The timing I think is quite good because it's the morning for you, I think. I think the is it category C go off at 8:45 a.m. for you, which means it's later in the day for us as well. So we should be able to catch quite a few time zones as well. Because obviously you're 6, 7 hours behind where I am in the UK, in Europe, and the Aussies. I guess it'd be in that part of the world. It's going to be later in the evening. But in terms of preparation, and I'm not thinking preparation in terms of weeks ahead because it's this Saturday. What should we be doing if this race is on a Saturday morning? What should we be doing Thursday, Friday, Zach?
Yeah, so for a race day, for a 1 day race, I would always do a recovery ride or a day off 2 days before. So with Echelon Racing League on Saturday,
Got it.
Thursday is going to be either a day off or an hour easy spin. If you're outside, you could go to the coffee shop. If you're on the trainer, just an hour, watch some Netflix, watch some TV, something like that. And then Friday, I would do some pre-race openers. So pre-race openers are pretty individual. Some riders like to do a good amount of intensity, some zone 3, zone 4, zone 5, maybe some sprints. Other riders, maybe it's just 1 or 2 VO2 max efforts, something like that. Just kind of open up the legs the day before the race so that you're not too stale or too cold going into the race. And
Got it.
I know that MyWhoosh has a number of pre-race openers workouts in the workout folders. So there's a couple different sessions in there. There's one that's actually it's modeled after what Tadej Pogačar does with his openers. It's a train like Tadej openers workout, and I've done that one many times. It's a really good one. So there's always stuff that people can try on MyWhoosh.
And I think what I found with those openers, Zach, and I think it was from talking to you a few months back that everyone's different in terms of openers. I know your opener session is longer than I would do, for example, because I tried a few different ones and I found that if I did any more than 50 minutes, I was sort of a little bit fatigued still. Maybe that's just because I'm a little bit more mature now than let's put it that way. Whereas for me now, like I know 35 minutes is where I top, but I've still got to put some zone 6 stuff in there, really short, just to open up the leg. So it's worth. I think that's why we've got so many of those primer sessions in there, right? Is just find the one that works for you and experiment. But absolutely, so nice, easy coffee cake day on a Thursday, and then just something to sharpen the tools on a Friday. That's really, really good insight there. And hopefully the community will see plenty of those taper sessions happening on Friday, ready for that Saturday race. There's two other events I want to talk about. One of them in particular that I know you have had a hand in designing, which is the MyWhoosh 300, which is going to be kicking off sort of over this festive period. Do you want to give us a bit of insight into this MyWhoosh 300 and what it's all about?
Yeah, so the MyWhoosh 300 is a week-long challenge to ride 300 kilometers on MyWhoosh, and it's going to count across all the different types of riding. So the kilometers could come from a race or a free ride. They can come from
Yeah.
workouts, anything that you do from a training plan or group rides or anything like that is all going to count towards the 300 kilometers. And the reason we chose the 300 kilometers was we wanted to make it a little bit easier because the holidays is a very busy time. And
Yeah.
even though a lot of people take time off of work, they still you have a lot of travel and you have family commitments and you have other events going on. So to ride every single day is sometimes a big ask. And if you're doing a couple hours every single day for a week with all the family and holiday stuff going on, it can be a lot. So the 300 kilometers should be a really good benchmark for most riders, and it's something where it gives you that flexibility if you wanted to take a day off or if you wanted to do a race in the middle or of the challenge or something like that. And I'm really excited because it's one of those things that I have only done a few challenges like this before,
Yeah.
but it's something that I love when it's all at a time like this where there's a lot of people home, there's a lot of people on the indoor trainers, a lot of people doing this challenge and doing these rides together. So it's that community aspect where even if you're with your family and really busy during the day, you can jump on the trainer and there's thousands of people doing this challenge all at the same time around the world.
I think when you told me about it as well, the thing that got me right is I've done the Festive 500 bluntly in the past, right? And it's quite a slog. It's quite a commitment to go and do 500K in those 5 days, right? And not just in terms of the energy expenditure and what it takes out of you, but it's a time when you want to be spending time with your family, as well, right? And it's not achievable for many people. My wife would God bless her, really struggle to do it. And then I mentioned this to her, but it's one of those. I think 300 is really I said it's challenge enough for someone who rides on a real regular basis, like me. It's above and beyond what I would typically do in a week, but it's really achievable for someone who doesn't ride that often. And put my wife into that category, and she's like, yeah, I'd be up for that challenge to do something like that as well. And the fact, like you said, that you could do it via group rides, workouts, live workouts, free rides, pacer bots, however you want to do it, that 300 kilometers is there to do. Is there any specific training that we should be doing for this, or just take it as it comes? What do you think?
I would say it really depends on what level you're coming from. I would say if the 300 kilometers is going to be a lot more than you usually do, then it's
Yeah.
something where you would want to prepare in a way that you're setting yourself up to finish strong. So with a challenge like this, the biggest rule, the number one rule that I always talk about is that you do not want to start out and do too much too early. So if
Guilty.
it's a 7 day challenge, me too, me too. If it's a 7 day challenge, don't go out and do 100 kilometers on day one.
Yeah.
Maybe part of your brain is gonna think, well, I'll just knock off a big chunk right now so that later I can take it easy and above. Well, if you go overboard, it's really, really hard to recover,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
if you're not used to that. It's something where as soon as you go out too hard too early, it's really hard to come back from that. And it feels so good to finish these challenges strong. If you really pace yourself in these first 3 or 4 days, then you can really smash the last 2 or 3 days. And it's such a good feeling to be able to race in the second half of a challenge like this or
Yeah.
something like that, where you can really push yourself. Because at that point, you can empty the tank in the last day or two because you know this is it. You know there's nothing after this. You can just recover. Where if you smash the first 2 days, it's gonna linger in the back of your mind that I still have 150, I still have 200 kilometers to go and all these other days. And now I need a recovery day, and that's going to hurt the other days. And it's something where you really want to pace yourself at the beginning and really smash it in the second half, is what I would always recommend.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I always say that as well when I'm doing live workouts, and maybe we've got to work. I mean, today I think we've got 30 15s today, 3 blocks of, and it's really easy with some workouts that you see all these red, this zone six stuff, and you think, right, I'm going to really smash these first 3 reps, right, and then you end up suffering later on. But in actual fact, a lot of the gains sometimes will come later on in that workout if you just have the control to stick with those numbers. And that's why I do lean towards ERG quite a bit, because it gives you that control, that sort of psychological control as well, to not overcook it too early, because there's a reason that you have done the training programs with this percentage of FTP, percentage of anaerobic powers, because that's where those gains are. And if we overcook it too early, then again, even in those individual workouts, you're not going to make it through the workout and get the gains that you and the other coaches have programmed and planned. And the science says we should be doing, right.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I always try to help people think about when you're in a race situation or maybe just a hard group ride. It's almost always the case that in the first 5 minutes, everyone can smash it. Everyone can go hard because we all
Yeah.
feel good. We're all fresh and everyone's feeling super good. And then halfway through, you kind of separate the super strong from the not as strong. And then it gets really, really hard. And then in the last quarter or the last third of the race, that's where it all happens. That's where if you've controlled yourself, if you pace yourself at the beginning, that's when you can win. That's when you can break away. That's when you can make your move because you have the legs, because everyone feels good at the beginning. So everyone can go really hard for the first 4 intervals if you're doing six, but it's those last two that really count. And I really do like the, as you said, the erg mode workouts where you can kind of control it in the first few reps or first few intervals. And then the workouts that I am happiest with, the workouts that I come away just feeling super, super good and super, super confident, are the workouts where I keep it on erg mode for the first maybe 2 sets if I'm doing three. And then if I'm feeling good on the third set, I'll bump up the power goal by maybe 10 watts or 20 watts. And
Yeah.
if you can do that last set at a higher power output, that's going to give you so much confidence for the races where you did these really hard intervals and repetitions, but then at the end you were even stronger and you're able to push that higher power. And that it's such a good feeling.
I was going to say not races aren't won in the final in the first quarter of a race, but then I was just remembering that Tadej Pogačar went for like 100K in the World Championship final. So in some cases with those kind of athletes, they literally are, but they also have got training plans, and I'm sure keep that control so they can maintain that for such a long time. But there's something else I want to talk about as well, because and this is going to be personal for me, right? Because, and then I'm going to get onto the community questions. We spoke about the MyWhoosh 300. We spoke about the Echelon Racing League, and I've said I've signed up for that. I'm also going to sign up for the OTR Tour de Mont, and hopefully many members of the community sign up for that as well. That starts on the 1st of January. 12 stages over, I think, over 13 days. There's a rest day in there as well, and I think that first week is a team time trial, so you could do your team time trial at any point in that week, and then you've got 11 almost consecutive days. Can I use that MyWhoosh 300 as preparation for that, or will that be a little bit too much? How do I balance doing the MyWhoosh 300 and then prepare for something like Tour de Monde at the same time? Tell me I can do it.
Yes, yes, you can definitely do it. It's one of those things where I would definitely say it's most important to keep that long-term vision, that long-term goal of you don't want to empty the tank with the MyWhoosh 300 if the next race, if the next challenge is coming up very soon
Yeah.
after or immediately after. It's definitely something where you would want to space out your recovery days. So maybe during the MyWhoosh 300 you do 2 days on, which could be a little bit harder, longer endurance days, and then 1 day off of either a rest day completely off the bike or 30, 45 minutes of just easy zone one recovery ride. So 2 days on, 1 day off, and then just repeat that. And I would say that should really give you enough recovery to go into the next challenge, because then it's going to be about recovering between those events, and that means keeping up with sleep and nutrition and everything you can do off the bike, because if you're racing consecutively on consecutive days for a few days in a row or maybe over a week, there's not much that you can control on the bike. You just have to go with the intensity. You can't take a recovery day that day if you don't feel good. You're just gonna do the race and you're gonna go with it. But you can do everything you can outside of that, where maybe you do a 20-minute cool down zone one, zone
Yeah.
I like to do zone 0.5 sometimes, of just like super, super low power, like barely spinning the legs, but it helps your heart rate come down, helps your core temperature come down, and you can really recover from a race with those kinds of cool downs. And then doing that consecutively, I think would really, really help.
No, that makes complete sense, and it's really interesting, right? Because you mentioned nutrition there as well, and hydration, and I guess more than half the battle there is also making sure that you're getting the right fuels in during your rides and also post ride as well to recovery, where you've got these repeated days. And I think that's definitely got to be a topic that we discuss for a future show, Zach. And I think that's really interesting, right? Because I'm already thinking of like 10 other topics that we could discuss over the coming months as well. But we want these questions to come from the community. So again, don't forget, drop us your line if you've got any questions. Now, we have had some questions in, Zach, so I segued really beautifully there. I hope you agree there. But it's about staying cool to perform, and how to perform at your best when you're indoor training, right? This is you can see my studio behind me here. It's quite a smallish studio, but this is where I do all my training and racing as well. And although it's quite cool in the UK, it's not super cool in here, because once you get riding, once you get warm, the whole place heats up, right? But maybe talk to us about how important is staying cool, and what can that mean for performance?
Yeah, staying cool is, I think, really, really underrated in cycling and with most athletic performance. I think it's one of those things where people focus really hard on what's the perfect interval set, or how do I recover? What kind of recovery thing can I buy to massage my legs or something like that? Where staying cool on the bike is as important to your performance as is drinking water and eating food, I would say.
Yeah.
I would say as soon as your body really overheats to that point where your core temperature is really elevated, you just won't be able to perform. And this is why a lot of professionals, a lot of people at the highest level of sport are doing heat training now. And we saw it with Tadej Pogačar this year. He was using the core sensor for his training and in
Yeah.
racing too. And it's one of those things where I think the science is maybe a little behind on this. I think a lot of people are going to start doing this in the next few years. And on the indoor trainer, it's a lot more simple because the environment is a lot more controlled. When you're outside, if it's super, super hot, it's super, super hot. There's not much that you can do. Whereas on the indoor trainer, you can always get more fans. I always say if you're too hot in the indoor trainer,
Yeah.
I've seen people with 5 or 6 fans from every single direction, all all these industrial sized fans just keeping them cool. And it's super simple, and something like that is always going to help. I think that at the advanced level, I think if you have a portable air conditioner or dehumidifier, that's something that really helps bring the temperature of your training room down. And then I think another simple one is to just drink cool liquids. I know that some people even do kind of these slushies that are it's kind of half ice, half liquid, and just having that just drinking something like that can help bring your core temperature down from the inside. And with trainer racing, with esports cycling, it's a lot easier because the races are pretty short. Whereas outside, those bottles would melt so fast if you had them in your bottle cages. But on the indoor
Yeah.
trainer, if your race is 30, 40, 50 minutes, then you could kind of have that bottle next to you and kind of sip on it throughout the race. And stuff like that is really going to help with that. And it's really underrated. I think there's not a lot of people that really focus on that for their performance, but they really should.
And I guess the other aspect to that as well, and again, this is something I've said in my coaching sessions, and it's the same with nutrition, that put them on and start drinking from the start, right? Don't, because what I do, this is a cold training room, right? So sometimes in my live workouts, I'm like, right, I won't put the fan on yet because I'm freezing cold. And I had someone in the session this morning saying, "Oh, I'm cold. I'm finally warm now." But from a performance point of view, the sooner you can get that fan on, the sooner you can start putting that nutrition in, not waiting until you're thirsty or 15 minutes in or waiting until you're warm. Get them on immediately. And yes, you've got to ride cold for the first 5 or 10 minutes. Well, hopefully you've done your warm up anyway, right, Zach? But start early. Don't wait until you're warm until you action those things, I guess.
Yes, exactly. It's like you said with nutrition, hydration, and with cooling. Once you really feel it, like if you're on the bike and your stomach starts rumbling and you feel hungry, it's probably too late. You're probably already behind. It's going to be really hard to make it up from there. If you're on the bike and you don't turn on the fan and you wait till you start sweating, and now you're like, oh, I'm hot now, I can turn on the fan. It's probably too late. It's one of those things where you want to. I mean, it's one of those things where I actually always start with the fans on high before a race, but I'll just ride with like a winter jacket or like a long sleeve jersey over. And then as soon as I feel I've heated up a little bit, usually it's 4 or 5 minutes, then I just take the jersey off and then I'm right at that really nice temperature.
Well, okay. Well, let's talk about that then. Let's talk about the flip side of that coin, right? Heat training, because this seems to be it seems to be like a trend now. And again, just to give a bit of information, I know that I think you've got a portable sauna behind you there as well. And our producer lives in Sweden, right? So I know he's got a sauna. I've been considering get a sauna. Not. I hadn't actually thought about this from a training point of view, but I've got the ice bath. I figure I might as well upset my wife and buy a sauna as well and go the whole hog and all those things. But what about heat training? And I wonder whether you or any of the other athletes maybe did some heat training in preparation for the esports finals that were in Abu Dhabi, although it's quite cool in that room, for one. But that it just seems to be something that's gathering momentum, Zach. Is there any benefits for athletes, and is there any benefits for people like me who are not performing at the top of the elite spectrum, if I can put it that way?
Right. Yeah, heat training is one of those things where I think the science is a little behind it. So there's a lot of coaches and riders still experimenting with what works best, but it's something that the popularity, I've definitely seen it growing a lot in the past few years. As you've said, I've tried it myself with the portable sauna at home, and there's basically two ways that you can do heat training. One is to do the sauna right after a training session. So for me, I would do my ride on the bike, my just normal training session, nothing different.
Yeah.
And then immediately after that, as my core temperature is elevated, I would jump in the sauna for, at first, I would probably do 15 minutes to start.
Yeah.
And then I would build up to 20, 25, and then 30 minutes at the most. Nothing crazy, nothing super hot. Definitely keep drinking while you're in the sauna. I've heard, I've heard people that they think that if you're dehydrated, it helps. And it's not. It's not like that at all. You definitely want to keep drinking.
Yeah.
Make sure if you're dizzy at all, stop right away. You don't want to be on the point of passing out. It's something where you get your core temperature elevated and you hold it there, and that's going to stimulate the training effects. It's nothing. You don't have to really feel like you're suffering. It's not like a
Yeah, you haven't got
zone
to
six
really,
workout on
really
the bike.
push it. Yeah. And you're right there, but it's balancing that with staying hydrated because being dehydrated has such a bigger impact on an output and performance that it's just not yeah the risk it's just too risky to get yourself to the point where you even moderately dehydrated, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and and the other way to do heat training is to do it on the bike, and that's where if you've ever seen anyone in one of those, it almost looks like a painter's suit on the indoor trainer.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
there's a lot of professionals that, well, not just professionals, but yeah, esports cyclists and amateurs too that are trying this stuff where you basically do your normal training session on the bike, and then you keep riding, and then maybe for 20 or 30 minutes at the end of the session you put on either this heat suit, or some people just they put on a couple layers, put on a couple jackets, turn off
Yep.
the fan just to heat up, and you basically get your core temperature up, so your heart rate is going to be elevated, and then to keep your heart rate and your core temperature there, your power actually slowly comes down for about 20 minutes, but you just keep riding and you keep your core temperature there, and that's going to stimulate that similar heat training effect as it were if you were in the sauna. Again, it's one of those things that at the beginning you really have to take it easy and ease into it. Keep drinking and don't go too hard. You don't need to be doing threshold power or anything like that. It's much more about the temperature than it is about the power and the effort that you're putting into the pedals. And it's something that you want to keep it very controlled, very monitored. And then right when you hit that 20 or 30-minute cutoff, you don't need to do anymore. There's no benefit to doing an hour-long heat training session or anything like that.
Got it. Got it. Right. One other topic, one other question that we've had in. What are low cadence intervals and should we be doing them on a regular basis? I'll be honest, I love them. And I have said this to you before. I really love them. I do them quite a bit in sessions as well, but I also do them because I I don't weight train right now, and that's another topic we've got to is at some point. So but I feel rightly or wrongly, and you correct me, that if I'm doing these sort of low, high torque sort of cadence intervals, low cadence, high torque intervals, that I'm going to get those sort of changes in the neuromuscular way that might offer similar benefits. Right, wrong, totally off the mark. What's the science there, Zach?
Yeah, I really like low cadence training. It's something that I do myself, and I do prescribe it for my athletes. And I think it's a really good workout. Again, it's one of those things where as long as you do it the right way in a very controlled way, there definitely are benefits to it. And I think there was just a paper, a scientific study that came out maybe last week on the benefits of low cadence training, and they had two different groups where one group did the low cadence training and the other didn't. And the low cadence training group improved significantly more. And that's something where there aren't many studies on it, but it is growing and it's very, very popular among professionals. And I've started doing it myself, and I really like it. It's hard to say exactly where the benefits come from because for certain people, some people, especially on the indoor trainer, they like to race at a low cadence. So there's kind of a direct
Yeah.
comparison where if you train at a low cadence, it's going to directly translate to race performance. But for outdoor, I know plenty of professionals that they race seated at 9500 RPM, and then they do low cadence intervals at 50 or 60 RPM, and they still get the benefits from it there.
Yeah, that was my question. What is low? What's considered low? But you said it there. So 50 or 60, right? And yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm thinking about your team. You ride for Next Esports, now, and you've got quite a spectrum there. You got Brian Duffy, who I get. I mean, he always looks like such a powerful guy, but he looks like he rides down at 50, 60 RPM. And then you got someone like James Barnes, another finalist there with you in Abu Dhabi, who he just seems to ride a regular 90 to 95. Both awesome athletes, but is there anything there in terms of efficiency, or is that just down? Because I remember also back on the day on the road, it was like, right, 95 RPM is the efficient, that revs to be riding at. Is there anything in that? Is there any science in that, or is it personal? And is there anything we could do? Can we monitor our power, cadence, heart rate variability, and have a look what works for us?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't actually know as much science about it, but I do know, at least anecdotally, there are, like you said, riders across the entire spectrum. And on the indoor trainer, there are more riders that tend to do the
Right.
low cadence. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of guys that ride out of the saddle and they race at 60 to 70 RPM, so a little bit higher than I would normally prescribe low cadence intervals. Low cadence intervals, I would keep it between 50 and 60 RPM. For beginner, I would do 60 RPM, and then for more experienced riders, I would do 50 RPM. But it's
Yeah.
one of those things where it does work both ways to do it on the indoor trainer. There's some riders that really like to do the 90 to 95 RPM. And there's the others, like you said, that whether it's zone 2 training, zone 4 threshold interval, or sprinting, I mean, they're doing 65 RPM. And it's quite incredible because I have tried racing like that before. And it really does a lot with your back and your core and your arms. It's a lot of stress compared to when you're seated. And I remember actually a couple of years ago, I was doing a racing series on the indoor trainer, and it was a stage race, but my rear shifter broke, so my gearing was stuck in the 5311, but I didn't have time to fix it before the next race, so I ended up just racing in the 5311 for I think 4 or 5 days straight. So I kind of taught myself to race it and take your 65 RPM, and I actually got used to it in a couple days. So it really opened my eyes to like this is something that it definitely does work. It could work if you train like that and you're used to it. But it's something that if you do start trying it, yeah, watch out for your lower back and your core because it's really hard.
Yeah, and your knees at the same time. So what I found is that, again, just anecdotally, before we wrap this up, I rode an individual time trial with some of the Polish community on Saturday morning actually, and Michael Kamiński was in. It sounds like I'm following Michael Kamiński, like he's this movie star now, but they've just started this sort of new Polish community racing league, and then they're doing this individual time trial on Saturday. I love an individual time trial, the sort of the race of truth, right? And I think they're going to use the same route every week, and the same riders are going to be there, and just seeing that progress week in, week out with the time trial. And it was about 40 minutes. But one thing I do in the time trial, and I think it's easier to do on an indoor bike because you haven't got the aero argument when is that you have outdoors, is I vary cadence quite a bit and use different gears just to try and, if you're constantly riding at 95 in the saddle on a trainer, I don't know, it gets uncomfortable after 10 or 15 minutes, right? And I know riding can be uncomfortable and that's what I like to do is then I up the gears, get in a bigger ring, get in a bigger gear, slow the cadence down for a couple of minutes, get out the saddle whilst keeping the power and the watts per kilogram high. And it seems to just give that variation while managing the power, the same power, that just gives a bit of relief in certain parts of the body, like your back or your knees or, just different muscle groups as well. So, yeah, it's something else to think about at the same time. Zach, there's like so many cans that we've opened up today, I think, and we could talk forever, but we are at risk of this becoming like a really in-depth show and going on for another hour. But I know at some point the producers are going to start winding us up and giving us those marks as well. Zach, really appreciate you joining us again here. And you're going to come back. I think we're going to see you again in January to discuss whatever it might be from a coaching and a training point of view. We're going to get you doing some lives at some point soon as well, hopefully over this holiday period. So you two could train live with Zach Nehr in a time zone, which I think will be you suit a lot of people because, like I say, that central time zone that you're in there, it works for a lot of us as well. So we hope to see you on there. Zach, wishing you a great December and a good training. Hopefully, we'll see you on that MyWhoosh 300 Echelon Racing League. You actually going to be racing that?
Yes, I will. Every single race. Yeah, I'll be there.
Fantastic. So I'll wait to see you on the start line because you'll be in the elite and I'll be in category B somewhere there as well. But thanks again. Don't forget, shout out to the community. If you've got any questions for the team here at MyWhoosh, head coach Zach Nehr, then drop us a note on the social media channels. Or again, you can drop us an email, direct race control. Thanks for listening. This has been episode 14. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you soon for another Inside the Ride by MyWhoosh.
On this journey we'll guide inside the ride where we fly. Virtual roads touch the sky. Join us here, don't be shy. Inside the ride, yeah, we hide.